Salutations, Seekers. Today's book review is going to be on Neil Shusterman's Scythe. Now, this is going to be a mid-level reading novel, so you should be able to follow easily along with it, even if you're a casual reader. It's a fantasy sci-fi novel, and the synopsis for this is it takes place in a world in which eventually an AI was developed that came to be known as the Thunderhead, which solved all problems. And instead of going Terminator and destroying humanity, because that was the only answer, it instead eliminated all the problems that existed in the world. It solved the socioeconomic crisis, it solved the climate crisis, it solved the population crisis, it solved, cancer and AIDS and all of it, and made sure that humanity was taken care of. It became a benevolent, separate caretaker of humanity. And this is a world in which, in order to control the population, there's a group of individuals that became known as Scythes. And the Scythes are a completely separate breed of people who don't regularly interact with the regular population, except to fill quotas. And those quotas are people who have been what's called gleaned. And when you're gleaned, you are basically being killed in some way, and then the Thunderhead does not interfere with the death. So it no longer prevents you from dying from poison or breaking a neck or falling off of a building or anything like that. And so it follows the story of two individuals who are selected to be apprentices to see if one can become a Scythe, or both to become a Scythe down the line. And it follows the story for that. Now, how this is going to relate to reality is it's a very interesting novel because it goes into what the meaning of life is when there's no longer death as a variable. Instead, it's what makes us different and special when we never die and all of our needs are fulfilled and satisfied, and knowing that the population that you might live with, your neighbor might be 300 years old and look younger than you. You don't know. So it's a very interesting perspective on that. Plus, the fact that families now are growing and growing and growing, and you have a family that's going to have the great-grandmother who has, then the great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, you, all the siblings, huge family units, and so it's a very interesting novel. Now, I love in how it gets into the personalities and how they can be shaped or even warped when you remove the fear of death entirely. And it's not even that the fear of death has been removed because of a psychological instability in the individual, but instead it's the actual fact that death is almost entirely removed as a variable from your day-to-day existence. They go into it a couple of things that you can still actually suffer from and aren't able to be repaired by the Thunderhead and its technology and capacity, but it's very specific. And so aside from being gleaned or one of these individual things that the Thunderhead can't do anything about, you don't die. You go on and on and on forever. And it's a very sobering thought when you consider how much trouble you might be having with your life, or with finding passion, or even with the state of your relationships with your friends or your family. And then imagine that scenario knowing that if nothing changes, it's not just going to be possibly decades, it's going to be centuries. And so he goes really well, I think, into how it can twist societal norms and individual character aspects. You get people who are sick and twisted now in not just the ways that were off before, but are now violently skewed from the scale because that scale has been shifted so far. It's a really good read. It has really beautiful art on the cover. I don't usually go into the cover art, but it has really beautiful art on the cover. It's simplistic and denotes the entire concept of the title without giving away really anything, and it's just beautifully done. So, as always, the 60-second review of this is going to be in my TikTok, link is in my bio, and salutations.